In this lesson, we're going to cover Module 5.0, how to round to the appropriate number of significant figures. So last lesson, we talked about how to determine the number of significant figures in a certain number. Well, in this unit, we're going to be doing a lot of calculations. And after you do your calculation, you should always round it to the appropriate number of significant figures. So we're going to start just with like an example problem. So let's say I gave you a number. You did a calculation and your calculator spit out this number and it has a whole bunch of digits. And we're going to practice rounding this number. So we know that all non-zero numbers are significant. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right now there would be 8 significant figures in this number. Let's say your answer could only have 7 significant figures. So we need to round this number to 7 significant figures. So if I'm keeping 7 digits, I would keep 1, 2, 4, 5, 3, sorry, now that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we want to look at the first number following that 4. If it's 5 or above, we're going to round up. So that 4 gets rounded up to a 5. So now this number has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 significant figures. Let's do the same thing, but now let's say our answer could only have 6 significant figures. So we're going to keep the first 6 digits. I'm going to start by writing the first 5. And then what I want to do is look at the one number following that 3. 4 is less than 5, so we're not going to round it up. We're going to leave this at 0.53. What you do not want to do, we call it double rounding. We wouldn't want to say, well, this 7 rounds the 4 up to a 5, and this 5 would round the 3 up to a 4. When we are rounding, let's say we need to keep 6 significant figures, we're going to keep the first 5, and then for that 6th digit, you just look at the one number that immediately follows it. If it's less than 5, do not round it up. 4 is less than 5, so we're going to leave it at 0.53. Same number, let's go to 5 significant figures. So we're going to keep the first 4, and then for the 5th number, we need to determine if it's going to round up or not. So that 5th digit is 0.5. I want to look at the one number that comes after it. It's less than 5, so we're not going to round up. 1,245.5. 4 significant figures. We're going to keep the first 4 digits. We want to look at the one number. If it's 5 or above, we round up. So this would round up to 1,246. Three significant figures. Again, look at the original number. We're going to keep the first 3 digits. We want to look at the one number following. It's 5 or above, so we're going to round up. So 124 rounds up to 125. The biggest mistake that I see is students leave the answer as 125. Think of it this way. If I owed you $1,245.53, and I gave you $125, and I said, it's the same thing, I rounded, are you going to be happy with that? Probably not. $125 is not anywhere close to $1,245. So how do we get this number to have 3 significant figures? What we could do is we could add a 0 to it. This 0, think of it like a placeholder. It is not significant unless there is a decimal. So now if I owed you $1,245 and I gave you $1,250, you would be much happier. Let's go to 2 significant figures. So again, I'm going to keep the first 2 digits. Just look at the one number following it. It is less than 5, so we do not round up. Again, we don't want to double round. We don't want to say this 5 rounds the 4 up and that 4 rounds the 2 up. If I'm rounding to 2 significant figures, I keep those 2 digits. I only look at the one number that comes next. Again, $12 is nowhere near $1,200. So the way that we hold the value of the number without adding significant figures is we place zeros there. And then lastly, if we wanted to go to 1 significant figure, my answer would be 1,000. I keep the first digit, the next number is less than 5, so I do not round it up, and then we put zeros in. Those zeros are not significant unless there's a decimal. So now that we've gone through rounding, how do you know how many significant figures you should round to? Well, it's going to depend based on the type of problem that you are doing. So first, let's start with rules for rounding when multiplying or dividing. So first, we are going to multiply or divide in normal fashion. And what I mean by that is don't round any numbers before your calculation. Do not round until you get to the final answer. Do not round until you get to the final answer. Perform all calculations before you think about rounding. Rule number 2. We are going to round the final answer based on the least number of sig figs in any number. Round the final answer to the least number of significant figures in any number of the calculation. So let's say I had 0.51 times 53.2. And we plug this in our calculator and we get 27.132. And we need to round our final answer to the appropriate number of significant figures. So what we want to do is look at each number in the calculation and determine how many significant figures there are. 0.51 has 2 sig figs. Remember, leading zeros are not significant, so the 5 and the 1 are significant. 53.2 has 3 sig figs. we're going to round our answer to the least number of significant figures. Well, in this case, 0.51 has the least number with 2 significant figures. I'm going to round my answer to 2 significant figures. My next number is less than 5, so I'm not going to round up. Your final answer that you would write would be 27. Let's try another one. Let's say we did 804.2 divided by 37.1. And when we put this in our calculator, we get a really long answer with a whole bunch of digits. So again, we want to round it to the appropriate number of significant figures. 804.2 has 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. 37.1 has 1, 2, 3 significant figures. We're always going to round to the least number. 3 is less than 4, so I'm going to round my answer to 3 significant figures. 7 is greater than 5, so this would round up to 21.7. So whether you are multiplying or dividing, we multiply or divide in normal fashion. We look at the number of significant figures. Whichever one is smaller determines how many significant figures can be in your answer. Next, we have slightly different rules for addition and subtraction. So rules for rounding. When adding or subtracting. So again, first rule is going to be the same. Add or subtract in normal fashion. Don't do any pre-rounding. Do all of your math first. When you get your final answer, that's when we round. 2. We are going to round the final answer to the least number of decimal places. So now we're not counting the total number of significant figures, we're only counting the decimal places. So let's say I had 4.67 plus 9.376, and when we add these together, I get 14.046. So all that we're counting are decimal places. My first number has 2 decimal places. My third number has 3 decimal places. That means my answer could only have 2 decimal places because we're going to go to the least number of decimal places. 1, 2. The next number is 5 or above, so we're going to round up. My final answer would be 14.05. It could only have 1, 2 decimal places because this number has 2 decimal places. Let's do another one. let's say I had 87.1 minus 12.732 minus 31.45. And when we calculate that, we get 42.918. So again, we're only counting decimal places. My first number has 1 decimal place. My second number has 3 decimal places. My third number has 2 decimal places. You want to compare every single number. Whichever one has the least number of decimal places determines how many decimal places can be in my final answer. I can only have 1 decimal place, so 42.9.